Crownfall is a 4-act campaign taking place from April 18th, 2024 until February 6th, 2025 that tells the story of Shendalzare the Vengeful Spirit and Dragoness the Skywrath Mage reclaiming the throne from the ruling monarch of Skywrath, Queen Imperia. Thematic rewards are earned by progressing through the story, which contains comics, copious amounts of dialogue, and even minigames featuring familiar heroes as well as original characters. By Skriok's name, this is the entire story of Crownfall. The story begins with the Ascension Day comic. This takes place on the anniversary of Imperia's ascension. Dragoness asks to speak with her, although there appears to be some hostility, as a guard and the queen both question his loyalty. Imperia suspects that the Flightless are plotting something, though Dragoness tries to convince her otherwise. We learn that Imperia is the source of Dragoness's powers, and that she allows him a day off every year because she thinks she's broken him, as this is the anniversary of the day that she killed Shendalzare, also known as the Vengeful Spirit, and Dragoness's former lover. From here, Dragoness heads to an abandoned temple, which once worshipped a goddess named Skriok, until Imperia outlawed her worship 10 years ago. Dragoness is met by a monk who hesitates to let him in until he hands over a bribe, and he asks to perform a ritual that will bring back Shen, which he does every year to let her glimpse at her former kingdom. Upon her arrival, she wonders if anyone even remembers her after such a long time, but the monk reassures her that the Flightless absolutely do, revealing that this had been the goddess Skriok in disguise all along. Skriok had taken Shen in on the first Ascension Day, shortly after Imperia usurped the throne from her, hoping to use her as a champion, although she left to defend some sort of ancient for a while. Imperia's rule had torn down every temple and executed every priest, and with the last of her followers gone, Skriok is slowly dying, and she offers the last remaining bits of her power to both Shen and Dragoness in order to reclaim the throne. In doing so, the Flightless can return to their old way of life, and Skriok can have her powers restored. With the strength of the goddess surging through them, the lovers take on new forms and head to Midgate in order to set their plans in motion. The trio make their way to Midgate, with the goddess suggesting that they convince the Flightless to fight alongside them. Dragoness has his doubts, referring to them as cooks and gardeners, but Skriok assures them that they hate the topside and have been training an army of monks known as the Kazurai in secret. The leader has been in hiding as Imperia has learned of their existence, and her spies will find them in order to execute them for treason. Our heroes make their way to the market where they meet a friendly shopkeep named Bakit, although the amicable front drops the second they inquire about Kestrel. He doesn't trust them initially, pointing out rather accurately that Dragoness could be a Queensguard and Shen looks like Imperia's sister. Shen confirms, "I am Imperia's sister, as well as Dragoness. I am also a Queensguard, yes." Shen reaffirms Bakit that she's the true queen and nothing like her sister, and the merchant agrees to help as long as they can engage in the first of many minigames, fishing. Gone Fishin' has Leviathan the Tidehunter make a cameo and roots us on as we catch some fish. It's pretty simple. You cast your line 5 times, and the total point value of your haul is your overall score. You aim the direction and choose the power of your cast, then wait for one of the fish to get hooked. When they do, you reel them in by keeping the fish's icon in the green zone by clicking and holding the left mouse button. After the bar is filled up, the fish's uniqueness and size, as well as various bonuses, are added to your score. After a lovely afternoon at the pond, Bakit tells the rebels that the Kazurai are hiding in a hidden temple by the cliffside, and they move on. We learn more about the enigmatic Flightless here, as Skriok informs the group that the Kazurai actually have 2 leaders, Kraw and Kestrel. Kraw was the original leader who was part of an elder council that refused Imperia's bribe, leading him to a life sentence in a prison known as the Cage. When Kestrel was still only a child, he managed to find a way into the cage and broke Kraw out, leading Kraw to make him the first initiate of the Kazurai Order. The two are training an army to take Imperia down, and while Shen believes that this means they'll be easy to coerce into forming an allegiance, Skriok points out that they no longer want a royal family. Dragoness is taken aback by the thought, but that's a conversation for a later time. They reach the entrance of the temple only to find it surrounded by Queensguard, which certainly puts a hamper on the plans. However, a very helpful appearance by Bounty Hunter gives them some hope, at least for a fee. Gondar leads the protagonist to the temple, but they do have to give him all of their money for the help. When they enter, they witness a massacre of the Flightless, and even more repugnant, Pudge the Butcher is there to eat the remains. Although there was a chance that the leaders were caught in the crossfire, they did manage to escape, with Kestrel taking his army north to Ice Rack and Kraw south to the Desert Wastes. The group decides to split up to cover more ground, and Pudge reminds us time and again that he intends to devour the corpses. The ending comic starts with Kunkka the Admiral hard at work commanding his crew to set up his ghost ship for some guests. Shen greets him with a heartful hug and confirms that she's alive again. Meanwhile, Skriok is complaining that she had to travel in a wagon with Pudge all night, and he had not stopped emitting odors the entire time. We pan over to Dragoness and Shen, who prepare for the journey ahead of them. Dragoness is understandably worried, but Shen is optimistic and confident despite the odds stacked against them. She revels in her corporeal form. She had been a spirit for so long that the simple feelings of the breeze, sunlight, and even hunger bring her joy that she had long forgotten. Dragoness ends the comic by warning Shen that Imperia may know that Dragoness's powers are no longer tied to her, and she knows of the rebels' existence. But she doesn't know about Shen, and because of that, she's their greatest weapon, and he wishes her to keep herself safe. The side quests in Crownfall are offshoots from the main story, and they usually involve a hero in the Dota universe up to some hijinks. Some have lore implications, some are just good old fun. The first of which is Divided They Fall, which features Meepo who attempts to pickpocket Shen while at the bazaar. The Skywrath catch him doing this and threaten him, but Meepo convinces him that this isn't regular stealing, it's the loaf of bread to feed your starving family category of stealing. Turns out, one of Meepo's clones, which he all refers to as his twin brother, was locked in the cage because he made some bad bets with a Queen's Guard and didn't pay up, and his punishment would be execution. The thing with Meepo though, is that if one of them dies, all of them die. Despite their initial hesitation, the pair seemingly agree to help out Meepo, who assures them he has a great disguise and a plan to distract all of the Queen's Guard in the area. So here he is, in a chicken suit, attempting to pass by the guards, and when all else fails, Meepo pulls out a knife and starts a riot big enough that Shen is able to sneak into the cage and break out the imprisoned brother. At its conclusion, Shen admits that the breakout was pretty fun, and Meepo thanks them by stealing the coin purse that led to this encounter. And to commemorate the occasion, Meepo's chicken outfit is available as a cosmetic item set in Crownfall Treasure 1, named the Mockingbird. In Lost and Found, Juggernaut approaches the party and asks to speak with Skriok, who's already very familiar with him. He heard there was a great swordsman in Skywrath who Skriok confirms is Kestrel. Yornero heard that he is highly skilled, and therefore he thinks that Kestrel may be from the Isle of Masks, and if he is, that means Juggernaut will no longer be alone. He wishes to fight with Kestrel, and if they come to a draw, then he'll know that he has a brother in this world. Dragoness tries to correct him before Skriok interrupts and points to a temple of Avaliva worshippers. She tells Jug that the worshippers have captured Kestrel and mean to sacrifice him, which leads Juggernaut to murdering everyone in it. Dragoness can't help but point out that Avaliva is the main rival to Skriok in terms of worshippers, and that the temple just happened to be the largest one in the city, though Skriok does play dumb and merely notices that all of the priests are on fire. Juggernaut returns and is sad to learn that not only was Kestrel not in the temple, but Skriok deceived him. While Juggernaut laments at the idea that there may be no one left on the planet who's like him, the goddess whispers into his ear and lets him know how to find his very much alive sister. In The Missing Smith, the trio get lost and Shen feels like someone's watching her. She can't see them, but she can smell a stench so bad that it's making her eyes water. And before Dragoness can use a dust of appearance, Rikimaru reveals himself. The source of the stench turns out to be the Skywrath food, which is full of worms and rotting fish meat, which happens to be very nourishing and builds strong wings for the locals. Ricky explains that he's looking for a blacksmith named Shifty Busco, who's known to be the greatest bladesmith in the region. He paid Busco in advance to commission a new knife since he usually has a year-long waiting list, so understandably, Ricky's mad. Got a lot of special people to kill after all. Skriok finds the blacksmith hiding in a barrel, who tells him that Ricky threatened to kill him, and he lets out that there's also a bounty on his head. Busco hands over the knife, and Ricky implies that he's definitely going to kill Busco to collect the bounty. Shen asks Ricky if he would join them in their quest, and in a moment's notice, Ricky throws down a smoke bomb and sneaks off. For your efforts, you're awarded the Shifty's Short Blade, which gives Ricky's Tricks of the Trade a cool feathery effect. Also, not explicitly a story beat, but there is a section called the Candlemaker's Shop, which reveals what appears to be a small portion of an illuminated tablet when you complete the quest. This was meant to be a community effort, as every player has a different part of the tablet uncovered, and the idea was to compile all of the images together. This turned out to be a small patch preview of 7.36, which was a big deal as this introduced innate passives and facets, all of which were teased here. Act 2 starts with the Battle of Hell's Basins comic, which takes us to the night before an invasion in the red deserts of Druid. We learn that a fiend gate opened up and laid waste to the land, with seemingly no political motivation, just the destruction of the people. For the first time in centuries, the various tribes of Druid, including the Oglodi, Centaurs, and Valhesi have united in order to defend against the invading horde. Sorla Khan is seen rallying the troops and preparing for the battle ahead, opting for various and changing strategies to take advantage of the Horde's army, who is fighting under threat of torture. The plan is to set up an ambush where the army will feign weakness and fall back, only for a pair of Centaur troops and a very jacked disruptor to take them by surprise and disorient the invaders. The Centaurs and Valhesi are bickering, but Sorla puts an end to it and emphasizes that everyone needs to work together, or it'll be the end for all of them. Axe interrupts Sorla and tells her that thousands of flightless birds are marching towards the camp. It's Kra, one of the leaders of the Kazurai. He asks to simply pass through, as his group tried to overthrow his queen and lost, but Sorla warns him that an even greater evil is approaching along his path. With no options left, Kra offers his support to the united tribe, and within moments, the fiends approach, with the Underlord and betrayer to the Bronze Legion Rix ready to fight. We follow Dragonus in this part of the story. Splitting off from the main party and tagging alongside him is Pudge. While they've passed through a field of carnage to reach the deserts of Druid, they find themselves right back into another field of carnage, the aftermath of the battle of the 7 tribes and the Abyssal Horde. Axe approaches the two to explain what had just happened, only to be shocked at the sight of Pudge feasting on the remains of his fallen comrades. He warns that Pudge is only allowed to eat the demons, as they're preparing a pyre for their allies, and at this point, Pudge will leave the party, probably to eat to his heart's content. Dragonus meets with Sorla and asks her about the Kazurai. Unfortunately, they were wiped out in the battle. Kra, however, is still alive, although he's poisoned by an abyssal blade and is barely clinging on to life. Sorla wishes she could help him, but she's preoccupied by the needs of her own people, so she strikes a deal. Help Kra, and she will in turn help Dragonus. She also forces Axe to join the party, saying they have no use for him, as Axe admits that he led a small army to their deaths during the battle. Disruptor tells the group of an antidote for Kra's poisoning, which only exists in Azayog, the obsidian city of the Gate Fiend. All they need to do is cross a thorn bridge, and there will be a narrow path to the volcano's peak, where they'll be able to pick up the flowers of a plant to come up with a cure. Axe is more than willing to take on the quest, and the Centaur Warrunner joins them as well, as both of them call Dragonus Lord Featherton, much to the mage's chagrin. Dragonus mentions the tension between Axe and Sorla, and Axe clears the air by saying that she didn't take the leadership position from him, he gave it to her. When you're a leader, people complain to you all day. The soldiers need latrines. We built the latrines too close to the well. Everyone's sick, blah blah blah. And so he was more than happy to give it up to the natural bureaucrat Sorla. As he's finishing his thought, a meteorite crashes down and we're introduced to a comic about Anzua, the nomad star. The scene starts out with Axe and Centaur sitting down by a campfire, cooking dinner for the night when they see a comet pass by in the sky. Dragonus explains that its name is Anzua, a nomad star that orbits the sun and is visible once every 60 harvests. He stares at it wistfully, thinking of Shen and how she's doing when suddenly the star crashes into a nearby mountain. Dragonus notices a beam of light and investigates the scene to be met with Arkwarden. He suggests that they both go inside to take a look, but Zet warns him that they aren't responsible if Dragonus goes mad from what he sees inside. It seems that they have entered a hidden city carved in the inside of the mountain, and Arkwarden explains that the mountain itself is an ancient. In the next page over, it seems like time is moving differently for both heroes. They are carrying on a conversation normally, but Dragonus feels time moving forward, while Arkwarden feels it's moving backwards. While the Radiant and Dire Ancients are pieces of Zet, the mountain represents some other entity, a god of space and time that is constantly shifting while locked in place. Time looks like it's non-linear here, and Arkwarden urges the mage to not touch anything. But of course, his big meaty talons touches one of the facets, causing a large explosion, and for pairs of stones to land at both Axe's and Centaur's feet right outside. And this is how facets were introduced into the game. Thanks, Dragonus. Back on the main path, the group are about to make it to the thorn bridge at the base of a volcano. Axe tells them of a strict rule he has: no dungeons. As they make it to the bridge, the three argue about which one of them should walk across it first. While Dragonus wants to get the job done, Axe and Centaur argue that the bravest among them should be the first to do it. And while Dragonus tries to reason with Centaur, Axe sneaks onto the bridge and takes the glory away from the Warrunner. As they make it across, the bridge descends into the side of the volcano, leading directly into it. Much to his annoyance, Axe suspects that they have entered a dungeon. A skeleton in chains signifies that they're in an underground prison, the definition of a dungeon. Centaur points out that there's a skeleton with a sword in the distance who yells, "Strangers in our dungeon!" And although annoyed, Axe does what he does best and attacks. While Dragonus is preoccupied with the task at hand, Axe and Centaur get into a competition and spend more time than necessary on who can kill more skeletons. When everything is said and done, Centaur loses by 2 skeletons, so he volunteers to move over a boulder as his punishment, and they move on from the volcano, realigning with their mission. Dragonus returns the Abyssal Bloom to Disruptor, who gets to work on it, but all he really does is find some information through his scrying cauldron. He recommends they take the petals to the Abyssal Necromancers of Din, who are the only ones who know the secrets of blade poisons. It turns out they're a band of skeletons who live under the volcano. They are a timid and peaceful race who fear danger and run from strangers. Because of a certain killing competition, Dragonus asks if there's anyone else who could possibly help, and Disruptor sends them off to seek out a desert crone in the Nanorek Barrens, although she knows nothing of abyssal magic, and their best bet is to seek out the skeletons. Lord Featherton meets up with the desert crone, who turns out to be none other than Snapfire, or Beatty to her friends. She sees the Abyssal Bloom petals and recognizes them, and asks the group if they had seen some skeletons. Nicest folk you'd ever meet. Dragonus turns the conversation back to the elixir, and Beatty says those things are pretty useless, although upon hearing that their friend was dying of an abyssal wound, she knows of a cure-all that can fix him right up. She asks them to find 4 ingredients, all of which are scattered throughout the Act 2 map, and the players will have to click on the clues to get them. Petals from a cactus flower, a bag of demon blood, a puffball mushroom, and firebug thorax. Once you find all 4, Beatty will hand you the cure-all, and they all head back to Craw. The potion is administered to Craw, but he still needs time to recover. Dragonus needs to head out, so he requests any Kazurai that are left remaining. But Sorla breaks the bad news and tells him that the numbers have dwindled so much that they would be of no help. However, as Dragonus has repaid her life debt, she offers instead 2,000 Oglodi warriors, despite Disruptor's disapproval. She assures him that the Oglodi are strong, that they will win, and they will come home stronger than when they left. This is because they are the Red Mist Horde. Dragonus thanks Axe and Centaur for their help and bids them farewell, but they stop him and insist on joining. Centaur and Axe have both grown fond of Dragonus, and there's no way Axe was going to let Centaur rack up a new high score on the battlefield. At the conclusion of Act 2, Pudge greets Dragonus, and since he's already shown the Birdmen the Fields of Endless Carnage, he offers other paths on Pudge's guided tours. Axe and Centaur want to take him up on this great deal, but Dragonus mentions that they must make it to Skyrath by tomorrow morning, all 2,003 of them. Pudge is calculating how much gold to charge everyone, but Axe is able to convince Pudge to guide them for free. There will be lots of Queen's Guards, and the Butcher recognizes an opportunity for a chicken dinner buffet when he sees one. With that, the army of Oglodi and our heroes march on, with an uprising on the horizon. The first side quest of the desert takes us to the ruins of Barzoom. As Centaur explains it, Barzoom is the fallen city of the Oglodi that once thrived in the lands. That is, until Tarnsman summoned a great evil and now the homeland is cursed. This is why the Oglodi wander the deserts. It's a very painful memory for them, and it's considered a grave offense to even speak the word Barzoom in front of an Oglodi. Axel, the meanwhile, is very silent and uncomfortable by this conversation. He suggests that they change the subject, and Centaur points out that they can focus on the warlock Demnock, who's waving to them from the ruins. Warlock is there in order to summon the Tarnsman demon, Pakrajul the Devourer, a task that he has spent decades scouring the arcane archives for. The ritual was, interestingly enough, a living thing, so it was able to jump from book to book to avoid being found. Now that Warlock's got it, he plans on summoning the demon that cursed the land in order to enact his revenge on behalf of the Oglodi. Axe wants to summon the demon right away, hoping to kick his ass back to hell and break the curse. Although they're unsure about this plan at first, they don't really have any other option and proceed with the summoning. With Pakrajul out in the open, he points out a few fatal flaws in their plan. They didn't set up a return spell to send him back in case he was too powerful to overwhelm, they don't know how to kill him, and even so, killing him would cause the land to become even more cursed than it already was. Dragonus brings up the idea that they could just, leave him there. If they don't finish the spell or return him, Pakrajul will have to stay in the tiny summoning circle forever. And though he threatens Warlock to send him back, Demnock tells him that he memorized the incantation and killed the living words, so he'd be the only person able to help the demon in any way. Pakrajul concedes and agrees to decurse the city if they can send him back to Azayog. Warlock is about to fulfill his demand, but Axe interjects and questions if they really want Barzoom back. Before the city was cursed, all the Oglodi did was read books and write poems, and the curse forced everyone to toughen up in the desert. Pakrajul made the Oglodi what they are. It wasn't a curse, it was a gift, he says. While everyone is bickering, Pakrajul lifts the curse and sanctifies the land, causing Warlock to say the incantation, which happens to be, "Begone Pakrajul from this place, but backwards." And off he goes. Despite his earlier protest, Axe and Warlock agree that this is good for the Oglodi. Demnock says that even though their land is returned, there are still many like Axe who wish to fight and wander. Axe agrees and says that after all the softballs rebuild the city, they will have a place to spend all the money they made conquering and plundering, while Warlock says that they would happily exchange it for fatty food and liquor. Completing this quest also unlocks additional dialogue at the end of the chapter with Sorla, who tells Dragoness that Barzoom means Desert Jewel and they'll rebuild their empire. Dragoness offers her the allegiance of the Skywrath, and tells her that he would be honored to visit once it has been returned to its former glory. To the south of the map is the Desert Dash side quest, where Batrider approaches the party and asks if they'd like to take on a wager. His current bat is sick due to eating a weird volcano plant, and Batrider doesn't think he'll make it. Because of this, he needs a new ride, and since there aren't any more Mortabats in the desert, he challenges the heroes to a race, and if he wins, he gets to ride Dragoness anytime he wants. And then my script just says, insert obvious sex joke here. If they win, they get to have the sick bat, but as you can expect, Dragoness refuses. Batrider then says they'll play for pride instead and mocks Dragoness, which Centaur and Axe both take very seriously, and the Skywrath gives in. We're taken to a Flappy Bird style minigame, and upon winning, Batrider tries to force his bat onto the trio. When they refuse, he says they'll have to put him down, and the bat's big teary eyes convince Dragoness to take him in. Small spoiler for Act 4, but you'll be able to unlock this bat as a cosmetic whose name is Snotty. Further to the west is an arena, which starts the Broken Belt quest. Centaur mentions to Dragoness that his belt was struck by an abyssal pike which created a tear at the seam, and since they're nearby the arena, they can stop by to get it fixed. Dragoness is in a hurry, so he tells the Centaur that the belt seems ornamental, which Bradwarden takes great offense to. To him, it represents the absolute apex of gladiatorial skill. And it's still real to him, damn it! Seeing that it might be quicker to go get the belt fixed than listen to his ramblings, Dragoness agrees to stop by the arena. Axe questions the legitimacy of gladiator fights here, and asks if they're all fixed, to which Centaur challenges him to a fight to show him that it is in fact all real. A worker named Deborah confronts them, telling them to get out of line if they don't intend on fighting in the arena or filling out paperwork. Centaur tries to introduce himself as a renowned competitor, but Deborah breaks the news to him. There are 8 fights a night and 15 on weekends, and she's just there to process paperwork. Bradwarden asks for a belt repair form, and after an insufferable amount of waiting, Deborah pulls out a belt release form that he signed 5 years ago, which states that belts are the sole responsibility of the performer, so it's not their problem to fix. If he wants a new belt, he'll have to sign up for a fight and win one. There's a competitor behind them named Grax, who has a nice belt that Centaur has his eye on. They both fill out the proper forms and head into the arena where Bradwarden delivers a swift uppercut to end the fight quickly, and he asks Deborah for a new belt release form. Just before the end of the act is a side quest called Shadow Diplomacy. Sorla Khan approaches Dragoness at nighttime and asks him to join her. They make their way to an abandoned outpost where they meet with Treston, the Legion commander. Treston reveals that a year ago, Sorla came to her with a proposal: delay the conquest of Druid so that the 7 tribes could focus on Underlord and the Abyssal Horde. After their success, Legion Commander threatens the Red Horde and says that there is a now weakened Oglodi army for her to sweep up. Sorla retorts that Treston should be grateful for the Oglodi, and also cautious because the Red Mist Horde was able to do what the Bronze Legion could not: defeat the Abyssal Horde in battle. With that, Legion Commander backs down and suggests taking time expanding westward into the plains, and that they will meet again in the future. Act 3 begins with a comic titled The Dragon, which takes place in Frostreach, a snowy town that acts as the lone gateway to the frozen waste. We follow Shen, Skriok, and Bakit as they make their way into a tavern named The Severed Head. The group are met by a patron who asks for payment for entry, you know, a severed head, but the mention of Kunkka's name gives them access. Inside is a shady setting. The walls are decorated with heads and the people look hostile at best. While Shen has her eye on the prize, Skriok would rather have a drink and warm up by the fire. Shen meets with Ymir the Tusk and asks about Kestrel's whereabouts. The Terror from the barrier tells her that Kestrel left about a week ago to defend a village called Snowcap Lake from a dragon, but believes that he's likely dead just a mile outside of town due to the harsh conditions. Shen tries to hire him as a guide, but he refuses. The group lodges at the Severed Head for the night and plans to leave at daybreak. And just as she mentions this, we see that Kestrel is standing guard at Snowcap Lake as a massive dragon stares at him maliciously. The group get ready to head north. Bakit is highly optimistic about what's to come, while Shen is more grounded in reality. Skriok, on the other hand, will not be joining them, as she intends to enjoy the tavern under a mountain of blankets next to a fire. Shen and Bakit depart, but are almost on the verge of freezing to death shortly after leaving, with the ice immobilizing Shen's wings, so there's no hope to flying back to town. They're saved by a rather cheerful Crystal Maiden, who remarks that she's surprised that the pair aren't dead already. They beg her to build a fire, but there isn't wood for miles. They then suggest cutting open a beast to crawl into its carcass, but the blood would have them frozen solid in 5 minutes. With a deranged look and unhinged tone, she tells them, Out here with no coats, crawling inside dead animals. I like you guys. You're crazy. Crystal Maiden suggests they take the mountains, which is sadly much colder, but she goes to cull some beasts to make them winter clothes. The Crystal Maiden introduces herself as Rylai, and because she's the warden of the area, she makes it a point to know everyone there. Shen explains they're looking for Kestrel, who Rylai is unfamiliar with, but upon hearing that there's a dragon at Snowcap Lake, she offers to join the pair and gives them their comfy parkas. The party makes it to Snowcap Lake, where Bakit happily greets Kestrel. He's disgusted that Shen is with him, and alludes that there's no Kazurai army left. It's just him and a burly ally named Gralla. Kestrel is guilt-ridden after fighting with Imperia and getting a bunch of young soldiers killed, and he doesn't want anyone else dying because of him. He disbanded them after the fight and forced them to go back to their families. Some went with Kra to the south, and the rest went home. Shen pleads with Kestrel to join him. When you and Kra formed the Kazurai, you made her see the Flightless as a threat. You didn't lose a war and retire nobly. You lost a battle. The war you started goes on. Whether you like it or not, whether you're in it or not, this story is coming to an end. Kestrel, be in it. Despite the very good rally, Kestrel feels obligated to stay at Snowcap Lake, as he and Gralla are the only ones keeping the dragon from killing everyone. Rylai interjects and suggests that these bozos started a mess and they need to clean it up. Nobody is leaving until we kill this fucking dragon. Rylai asks where the dragon is, but Kestrel is unsure, so the Crystal Maiden makes the revelation that if anyone knows dragons, it's other dragons, and they go on to seek out a wyvern for her help. The group makes their way north and find themselves at the entrance to Winter Wyvern's lair. Thrail, the wyvern's thrall, greets them and ensures that his master was nowhere near the chewed up livestock or burned crops or stolen treasure or whatever it is that Rylai's here to bother them with this time. Although Rylai does think that all dragons are scum, she's just there to ask for advice, which Thrail responds with slamming the door, but Rylai's jammed her staff in the way and he's forced to confront them. Thrail normally would let people see his master, but she's not to be disturbed during her morning hour of contemplation, or 5-hour moment of meditation in the afternoon, or the 3-hour evening rumination. Crystal Maiden persists, and Thrail advises that she hits him with an ice blast, as it's the only way he won't get in trouble for letting them in. Rylai explains the situation, and Oroth claims that she doesn't know who or where the dragon could possibly be, until they pull its tooth out of Gralla, which was sunk into him during the last attack. Wyvern recognizes the Fang as Zog's, her second cousin on her mother's side, though last she heard, he was supposed to be doing 2 to 5 centuries in Dark Reef. Kestrel makes his intention known in that he plans to kill him, and Oroth is okay with it. He's a real piece of shit. Zog hates books. Oroth has something that she can give them to help them fight Zog, although she has to duel them for it, or else she'd get banished from the Eldworm Order. Everyone gets ready for battle, but Wyvern proposes something with a little more grace. A delicate ballet of intellect and instinct, a sonnet penned with strategy and skill. She's talking about Dragon Chess. Dragon Chess is a match 3 puzzle game similar to Bejeweled. Just match 3 of the same color to do damage, while matching 4 or 5 will give you bonus blocks that pop more gems, allowing you to rack up even more damage. Beat the opponent before they beat you, and you're good. Upon beating the minigame, Oroth offers the party the Shards of Frostburn, an artifact taken from the dark heart of the Obsidian Rift. Kestrel and Shen argue about who's going to kill the dragon, but Bakit breaks some bad news and tells them they still don't know where Zog is. Wyvern mentions that he may be located in Mount Amtor to the south, although she's not sure, it's just where she'd go if she started burning down villages and eating people. She also says that the shards will hurt Zog, but it won't instantly vaporize him, so it'll likely be a fight to the death. And upon hearing that, Shen agrees that Kestrel should take him on. Crystal Maiden butts in and asks if anyone else has killed dragons, because she's killed 7, and it's really hard. As the warden with the most experience, she demands to take the shards and they start heading south. They find Zog at Mount Amtor, who mocks the party, and when he sees the Shards of Frostburn, he knows exactly who gave it to them. His black sheep cousin who nobody in the family likes. He grants them their wish and he plans to leave Ice Rack. However, he's also going to stop along the way and eat every last villager at Snowcap Lake to spite them. As he flies away, Shen realizes that she's the only one who can fly and goes after him. From here, we're introduced to the minigame Zog's Lair. This is a horizontal side-scrolling shmup similar to Ikaruga. Enemies will shoot black or white projectiles. Shen can switch forms and being in the corresponding form absorbs the projectiles, which adds to her special meter, while shooting an enemy of the opposite color will deal twice the damage. With Zog dead, everybody is surprised but grateful. Without much time to celebrate, they plan on making it back to Skyrath to meet up with Dragoness. The party head back to the Severed Head where Skriok is having the time of her life eating everything they have to offer. Bakit proudly exclaims that he killed the dragon while Shen takes care of the massive tap that the goddess has racked up in her absence. The comic simply concludes with a conversation between Bakit and Kestrel. Bakit has high hopes that everything will return to how it was before Imperia's rule, noting that Shen will get to be in charge again, although Kestrel has reservations about that. Before getting into the side quests, there's a couple of things I want to point out. In the very beginning of the act at the Severed Head, you can engage in a game of Sleet Fighter. Sleet Fighter is a fighting minigame found in the initial village, and it functions like a 2D fighting game like Street Fighter, where the game derives its name. You can control Tusk, Dawnbreaker, Shen, Marcy, or Bristleback. And while it's certainly astonishing that Valve was able to implement this, the game is pretty basic. It is a fun distraction in case you need a break from Dota though. Also, Tidehunter makes a small cameo on the map here. If you go to the bottom left and click on the bubbles, he briefly emerges out of the water, showing that he's the size of several houses. The first side quest you can encounter is just outside of the opening city called the Lost Ziggurat, where Dante Panlin the Pangolier greets the crew. He's asking if they've seen a lost ziggurat in the vicinity, as he intends to relieve it of its gold, presenting his adventurer's license and plundering permit to ensure that he's got the clearance. Crystal Maiden objects, stating that a lot of these places are heritage dungeons, so he can't just go looting stuff, just the license standard of 10 goblets, a golden headdress, and some beads. He assures her that he won't take an ounce more, but she doesn't believe him for a second and insists on coming with him. Working their way through the cave system, they encounter a spider named Bibbit, and seemingly its handler Philip, when an ominous voice asks who they're talking to. Broodmother emerges and suggests killing the adventurers quickly so they can go back to nursing the other 1,000 children. Crystal Maiden asks about their situation, and the spider explains that long ago, a priest king vizier erected a massive ziggurat on the other side of the cave with the idea that anyone who wanted his riches would first have to go through the Broodmother and all of her children. Broodmother spent most of her day killing would-be adventurers to protect her babies, and eventually captured the vizier, now simply referred to as Philip, and gave him the choice to either help raise her babies, or to be slowly devoured by them. Pangolier asks if he can pass through to the ziggurat to loot his predetermined selection of treasures, but Philip brings up that it would only encourage more adventurers to come, so unfortunately, they have to die. Fated to death anyway, Dante asks him what the treasures are exactly, and Philip says that they're magnets.
Okay, what, like making magnets, collecting magnets?
Playing with magnets?
Just magnets.
Broodmother came to the realization that she never asked Philip what the treasure was, but she agrees to let the heroes go as long as they promise to tell every adventurer in the realms that the lost ziggurat is filled to the brim with magnets. Magnets. For fuck's sake, Philip. A little further up is the Collectors of Whitespire. Bakit notices that a nearby mountain is on fire, and Riley suspects that it must be her sister, Lena. She goes on a little rant about how much she hates Lena, and when they go up to see the source, it turns out to be her father, Geraldus Moon, who burnt an Everwood Grove, which happened to be the burial site of an elf maiden to get her attention. A gang of debt collectors approach them on behalf of the Draga family of Whitespire, and Lena shows up shortly after, as she'd been following the collectors for 6 days. Geraldus had stolen money from the Lich Mafia, the worst mafia around, in order to pay his wife's gambling debts. Lena mentions that their parents hadn't been the most honest with them, and they're pretty big scumbags. He told Lena as a child that she had burned down their childhood home, and Riley had frozen all their crops, which were implied to be lies to get them to flee the towns they were in, and in Riley's case, an insurance scam too. The collectors clarify that they're not there for money. The number he owes is so big in fact that it would take 1,000 lifetimes to pay back, and they even considered working him to the grave and resurrecting him 1,000 times to make it happen. However, the Lich Mafia do want to take him on as a fraud consultant, and Geraldus objects until the collectors say they can kill him 1,000 times instead, to which he cooperates. Lena and Riley come to the realization that their parents were to blame for breaking up the family, not the sisters. They try to get along, but there's so much bad blood that they can't bring themselves to hug it out, and Lena takes her leave. Going further along our path takes us to the bottomless pool. While walking, Riley asks if they can make a quick detour up some mountains. Bakit and Shen try to deny her, but it's too late, she's already sprinting. She needs to check up on a landmark in the barriers called the Bottomless Black Pool, which sounds impressive, but it's not actually bottomless, although no one's ever seen the bottom, so who knows. Riley tells the story of an ice wizard who took over all the kingdoms of Icerack until some mages got together and beat the stuffing out of him. They tied him up with some chained rope and heavy weights and threw him into the pool. The wizard fell for a year until his weight caught onto a branch or something, and the pool ended up making him even more powerful. Anyway, Riley needs to see if a sign she posted up is still there. When they get there, it looks like somebody knocked it over and Shen reads it aloud. Don't throw wizards in, just makes them stronger, not actually bottomless. Bakit's curiosity gets the better of him and he throws a rock in after Riley's blessing, which wakes up the Lich. Riley and Ethrian argue over semantics, and the Lich learns that she was the one who keeps posting the signs up, to which he claims that he's thrown scores of them down the bottomless pool. Shen acts as a mediator and suggests keeping the sign up to avoid additional Lich Mages being created, which both of the Ice heroes agree is the best solution, and they come to a peaceful conclusion. The Call of Ugnaught is the final side quest in this act, and it starts with Winter Wyvern telling everyone that someone broke into her non-book hoard and stole the Orb of Slithel, which has the power to summon one of the Slitherine Elder Gods from the lightless gulfs of the Abyss. Who would do something that stupid? Well, the Sunken Brotherhood of Fathom, who've been trying to summon an old deep one for years. They tried to purchase the orb from Oroth, but when she wouldn't sell, they just stole it instead. She tells them that the thieves likely took it to the lighthouse of Vapaja, where the veil is thinnest in Icerack. We shift over to the cultist perspective, and we meet Archimandrite, Brother Terrence, and Brother Lachlan. They see our protagonist approaching, and Brother Terrence suggests sacrificing Bakit, but the other two break some bad news to him. They drew straws last night while he was making chili, and Terrence ended up with the shortest straw, so he's going to be the sacrifice. After all, they would much rather kidnap Bakit and eat him. Back to our heroes, Kestrel notices that Bakit has gone missing, so he wants to go fight their way to the top. Shen takes Kestrel and flies them both to the top of the lighthouse instead, while Crystal Maiden and Gralla knock on the front door and deal with the cultists on the lower floors. Kestrel and Shen see they have Bakit on an altar, and Archimandrite argues with Terrence about who's getting sacrificed, which gives our heroes an opening to save Bakit. While Kestrel goes killing everyone in the room, Brother Lachlan grabs the orb, which causes him to be stripped of flesh and muscle, summoning Ugnaught, who hungers specifically for walrus monks. You see, summoning Ugnaught would pierce the veil between his world and ours, and he would have devoured all the unworthy, and well, the walrus monks thought they were worthy. They were not. While Ugnaught is busy with eating all the monks in the lighthouse, Terrence suggests a banishment ritual to send him back, which requires a sacrifice, and he takes his revenge on Archimandrite, volunteering him for the ritual. The banishment ritual works, and Ugnaught is sent back to where he came. Ugnaught ate most of the monks and the rest ran away, though the frozen waste will surely take care of him. With Terrence being the last survivor of the monks, Crystal Maiden asks if he would like to be a lighthouse keeper and to keep an eye out on the orb, mentioning that Ugnaught is the second most dangerous old deep one besides Sudril. Hearing this causes Terrence to get some ideas for another ritual, and to nip it in the bud, Rylai just takes the orb away and wraps everything up. Act 4's introduction comic is simply titled Crownfall, and it begins just on the outside of Skywrath's gates. Skywrath has a reputation for being hostile to outsiders, but any Skyrathian can tell you that this is a vicious lie, and it welcomes all outsiders, provided they can fly. For everyone else, there is the Lowland Gate. The wall surrounding the city is massive and impenetrable, so much so that no horde has bothered in the 6 centuries since its construction. Watch duty at the gate is infamous among the Queensguard even, and the motto of the Spire's Watch has been around since the beginning, "Hope you brought a book." A guard on duty named Ralnor is abruptly awoken by an unheard sight, Axe and Bradwarden. At first, Ralnor is loyal to his duty, telling the intruders that they will never take Southspire and refusing to tell Axe how to open the gate. Axe lets him know that Southspire was taken 10 minutes ago, and figured the large lever was the key to opening the gate. Axe threatens Ralnor, saying that he can see what the guard plans to do, uses big wings to escape, and warn everybody that the Oglodi are coming, but that's not going to work for him. He says that not giving up the Queen's lever secret took some real guts, so Axe offers him 2 options. Either they pull his wings off, or he flies away and never comes back. The guard chooses the second option, and Axe finds a book that he had been reading called Catrog's Poems. Catrog was a warrior who conquered an empire and wrote poetry about it. He had won so many battles in fact that he didn't have anyone left to fight, so he spent all of his time thinking about fighting instead. This is why the Oglodi only had 1 poet. This guy did it so well, there wasn't anything else left to say. As he tosses the book over his shoulder, one of Catrog's poems is told as we pan to the various groups coming to fight in Skywrath. There is no better silence than the one that comes the night before a battle starts. Once steel meets shield and fighting has begun, we rise to practice all our bloody arts. And yet there comes a type of vicious calm amidst the pain and glory of the field, that seems to me a soothing balm for restless thoughts and wounds that have not healed. We trade in death both given and received, and rally to the warriors who survive, leaving our foes with spears and skulls both cleaved, and that is when our people are alive. But damned be those who will not stand and fight, for all who live comes death as our birthright. The comic closes with Imperia looking on in shock as the Queensguard begin their flight, with weapons in hand. The release of this comic and patch also introduced Kestrel, now known as Kez, as a hero, and there's an accompanying comic that loosely relates to the events called Ascension Night. This takes place 8 years ago, and starts off at Midgate. We see the dynamic between the Queensguard and Flightless, as the area acts as a sort of checkpoint, where the guards are checking papers and asking questions to the Flightless who are trying to get to the topside, which they do via ladders. Nobody gets up without a good reason, and the last ladders are cut at dusk. Any flightless who are caught by the Highborns are sent to the Cage, a maximum security prison that we encountered in Act 1. Kez plans to infiltrate the cage by climbing up the sheer cliff at night, where he'll serve a life sentence if he's caught. On most nights, he'd be running into the Queen's Guard, but with it being Ascension Night, the citizens are having too much fun and the Queen's Guard have their hands full. We finally get to see the cage, and it's almost a floating hive-like structure where any flightless are sure to fall to their deaths if they try to escape through the windows, and the pathway leading into it is a fortress called the Spur, the headquarters of the Queen's Guard. Alternatively, there's a path through Shodo Temple, although it's locked up tight at this hour. Kez pushes in a brick that reveals a secret passageway before we're taken to a flashback of his time back at the Shodo Temple many years earlier. He is seen being judged by a council of elder members who ended up exiling him after repeat offenses, including sneaking out of the temple after curfew, spending the alms in places of low repute, sneaking back into the temple, and breaking Brother Sparto's ornamental egg. We get more insight and learn that the temple created a martial art designed to fight the winged folks of Skyrath, but Queen Imperia showered them with money and prestige, leading the elders to abandon the order, which caused it to disband. Back in the present, Kez takes a barrel of whiskey and drugs it, which he uses to dispatch the guards by pretending to be a servant. With the line of defense out of the way, he finds Bakit, the reason why he's here, and breaks him out. Other prisoners see what he's doing, and they beg him to break them out as well. And with too many stories to hear, he decides to break out everybody. Back in his village, the prisoners are reunited with their friends and family while Kez proudly looks on. Among the captives was Craw, who reveals he was part of the Elder Council who decided to banish Kez years earlier. He had been kicked out of the Shodo Temple after he noticed that they had lost their way, and he was imprisoned as a result. Now he wants to start a new order and to have Kez as his first disciple. Kez understandably says that he broke everyone out single-handedly, so why would he need Craw as a teacher? Craw then puts on a demonstration that convinces him instantly. Kez is more than happy to learn, and the rest is history. Act 4 is unique in that it has 3 different branches, with a different set of characters from the various acts going down each path. You can progress the story in any order you want, but the path to Imperia's castle is locked until they're all completed, at which point the heroes will come together for the final attack on the Queen. Starting on the left side is Dragonus' branch, where he's joined by Crystal Maiden and Snotty the Bat. Rylai says that she'd always wanted to visit Skyrath, and that she's got a lot of vacation days stacked up, so while they're focused on the mission, she wants to make side trips to certain landmarks. She suggests catching up with an old friend named Edrix, who was a former ice wizard. Dragonus asks if he's the source of her power, but she clarifies that she gets her powers from the Blue Heart Glacier, and he was the North Warden until she took over. There just so happens to be a building called the Blue Heart Glacier Temple, and they head on over. They're met by a disciple who asks if they're here to join the temple, and Rylai tells him that she's looking for a retired wizard named Edrix, to which the disciple asks if they're here to pray to him. So yeah, Edrix started a cult, convincing his followers that he's the conduit of the Blue Heart Glacier. Edrix moved to Skyrath in his retirement because it's the only kingdom that doesn't have any taxes, and he pleads with the heroes to not implement them if they overthrow Imperia. He offers them an artifact, a staff with the true shard from the Blue Heart Glacier. But the maiden already has one, so they move on to their next destination while Edrix reminds them that taxation is theft. I'm going to talk about the side quests as they come up here rather than grouping them at the end, just because it makes more sense in this act. And the first one we come across is the Curse of the Crimson Bloat, which starts with Rylai asking if Snotty is a vampire bat. Dragonus is unsure, but there's a sign that says Vampire Doctor up ahead, so they stop by and see if they can help Snotty. Inside of the waiting room, they meet with a portly vampire named Baron Porculescu, who can't process blood due to a sickness called Crimson Bloat, so he's drinking it but it sort of just stays in his body. Just then, Bloodseeker comes out and Rylai greets him. He corrects her and says that he's named Dr. Strigwer and pulls her aside. He's running a scam operation, attracting vampires and collecting their blood to satisfy the Flayed twins. He's collected so much in fact, that the twins suggested he slow down. At this rate, he only has to drain 1 vampire a week, and he has the rest of his days filled with sweet, sweet free time. Of course, he's not actually curing them, but the vampires have so much hope that they keep coming back. He notices that Snotty looks sick, and diagnoses him with a case of cavern cough, which is very common to bats, as there are lots of them where Bloodseeker is from. He gives them 2 pills and asks them to leave, otherwise they'll ruin everything. Upon completing this quest, Snotty will be cured, which will change his name to Sniffy, and his portrait will no longer have goo coming out of his nose. Just a little further down is the Butcher's Banquet quest. Dragonus finds Pudge on the battlefield, who immediately starts attacking him and tells him to get in the pile with his dead friends. He doesn't recognize Dragonus, even though the Skyrath tries to jog his memory. Pudge eventually figures it out, and Dragoness comments that there must be 100 dead Queensguard there, which the butcher has all killed himself because he intends on eating all of them. Dragoness objects and says that he's not allowed to feast on the corpses, but Pudge argues that he's doing them a favor by sparing their orphan children the horrible sight. Dragoness is beside himself with anger, but then Crystal Maiden eats one of the bodies as well, saying that it's delicious. Sniffy indulges too, and Dragoness tries to reel everyone back when Pudge reveals that Axe told him he was allowed to eat as many birdmen as he'd liked, if he was able to get them through the Fields of Carnage, which is a callback to the Act 2 ending comic. Dragoness is able to turn things around by convincing Pudge that he should eat the Oglodi corpses instead, by saying that they're considered a delicacy. With all of that settled, Crystal Maiden gets sick from eating raw birdmen, and Dragoness assures her that he's going to stay mad at her for eating his people and making his life harder. Up a little further, they reach a gate that Dragoness claims is impenetrable, as he mentions repeatedly that he oversaw its construction. He's rather proud of the work that they've done, but the only way to breach the gate is from the inside. That's when Spoon of the Goblin Techies appears, and says that he can blow it up as long as he sneaks in through the cracks and plants a ton of bombs. He does say it'll cost them, so they pool their money together. Dragoness has 40 gold on him, Sniffy is embarrassed and doesn't say, and Rylai has 200,000 on her. They get into it a bit more, and it turns out that the Ice Rack City Council gives her a budget to hire heroes to help slay dragons, but she does it herself and pockets the money, amassing about 40 million gold by now. Spoon overhears this and demands that amount, and we're taken to a minigame called Spoon Man. This is a pretty faithful Bomberman clone, where you take control of Spoon and plant bombs around the map, trying to kill the enemies to descend further down the dungeon. You can pick up power-ups by destroying the various blocks in your way, which increase your movement speed, increase your bomb radius, and the number of bombs you can place down. You can also change the types of bombs you get this way, such as remote detonation ones. At this point, the story is closed off until you finish the other two main quests, but you would be able to infiltrate Imperia's castle otherwise. Moving toward the middle of the map brings us to Shen's quest, where she's joined by Bakit and Skriok. Bakit remarks that before they left, Skyrath was the only town he'd ever known, and it all looks so small now. Skriok tells him it all looks so insignificant because they've returned as heroes, and she subtly tries to take credit for killing Zog in Act 3. Shen rightfully points out that Skriok was inside the tavern drinking or napping, and so she hands her a sword and asks her to prove herself against the Queensguard. They come across Snapfire, who mistook Shen and Dragoness to be siblings, and they see Squee of the Techies upgrading Mortimer's gear. After settling the matter of the bill, the group engage in a game of Castle Carnage, an Angry Bird style minigame that has you controlling Mortimer's cannon and killing creeps in order to get through the castle walls. Upon completing enough levels, the party can move into the second section. Once inside the gates, Shen notices that there are statues of Avaliva, Skriok's rival god, all over the place. Skriok complains that Avaliva is butterfaced and stupid looking, and mentions that while Skriok never forced anyone to worship her, it took Imperia's wrath to get people worshipping Avaliva. Bakit says that he never stopped praying to Skriok after all this time, although he never had any prayers answered since all he did was ask for sardines. Skriok mockingly suggests that he pray to Avaliva here, and gets mad when he actually does. Upon doing so, Bakit starts hallucinating, and the statues all start beckoning to him to touch them. When he does, he becomes possessed by Avaliva. The god makes a brief appearance here, saying that Imperia used both him and Skriok, and that she has a much more sinister goal in mind. While all of this is happening, by the way, Skriok's spitting on all of his statues. He leaves soon after, and you're awarded a Shen token for completing this section, which is used to get into the final area. On the right branch is Kez, joined by Axe and Centaur. The three start their story out bickering among themselves, but ultimately they're all on the same page. A horse you can't ride, a bird who can't fly, and the world's handsomest man move through the courtyard with their eye on the prize. They meet up with Grala, who tells them that he's dispatched 10 times 10 times 3 Queensguards, showing that although he's not good at talking, he's great at counting and killing. Centaur loves that he's keeping track, and asks him to join since they're all keeping score, although Axe wants Grala to pace himself so that they can get some killing in too. Along the way, Axe inquires about the Kazarai since he thought they all died in Druid. Kez tells them that the army that died was Kraz, and that he disbanded his own army, although they're all back now, and he supposes that makes him their leader. Axe's leadership style is much more relaxed. All of the Oglodi are on a kill-crazy rampage right now, and that's because Axe told them to be on one. He just says to stay out of their way because they're not picky about who they kill right now. A little further down and we see that the courtyard is covered in landmines, placed by Spleen of the Techies. The castle is just on the other side of the minefield, so they start negotiating. Imperia paid the goblin 10,000 gold to place the mines, and he says that he can take care of it for them if they pay him. They pool their money together, and Spleen accepts their offer of 10 gold without a second thought, and although confused, they don't ask any questions and get on with it. This will start a minigame of Spleen Sweeper, a Minesweeper style game where you have to identify where the active mines are by clicking on the field and using the numbers to deduce where they might be. The only thing that makes this different from regular Minesweeper is that you can use some power-ups to give you clues, but other than that, it's pretty much classic Minesweeper. Duel of the Masklanders is a side quest that has Juggernaut coming up to the party and recognizing that Kez is the swordsman he was looking for in Act 1. The party thinks that Urnero wants to fight, and both Axe and Centaur admit here that they believed Kestrel's head was a mask, but Juggernaut just asks if they've seen Skriok around. He wants to thank her for telling him that he has a sister, and also to introduce the two, which is when Serena of the Masklanders says hi. Not caring in the slightest, Axe and Centaur goad the two swordsmen into dueling each other, even taking bets on who would win. Kezal, meanwhile, is trying to get everyone back on track, but Axe insists that whoever wins the duel gets to fight Serena after to really determine who the best swordsman is. Serena corrects him though, as she's not a swordsman, but she does wield a pair of axes, which delights Centaur as he demands that these four fight it out. Serena is confident that she has no equal in axe combat, and this taunts the Oglodi, but once again, Kez tries to get everyone focused on killing Imperia. He convinces the Masklanders by saying that Imperia is trying to kill Skriok, so if Juggernaut wants to thank her, he'll have to join them in order to express his gratitude. Urnero hesitates and asks Serena what they should do, and she says that as Masklanders, a challenge was summoned, so they must fight. A little bit to the side before the Spleen Sweeper minigame is the Revenge of the Din side quest. Axe and Centaur are in the middle of their competition, with Brad Warden taking the lead at 111 to 87. They are interrupted by Gondar, who shows up with a skeleton over his shoulder, telling the group that he's here to kill them. The Necromancer said the guys killed his family in a volcano, and while Warrunner is proud of his 42 kills that day, Axe is playing stupid and tries to deny it happened. Kez asks how you even kill a skeleton on account that they don't have organs, and the Necromancer says that they're technically undead, and their souls inhabit the skeletons, which means that his entire family was left homeless. The party come to a pretty simple solution. They've all been killing so many people that the Necromancers can just inhabit the new corpses. All of them could have a new skeleton every day of the year if they'd like. The Queensguard bodies even have sick wings on them. Despite their argument, the skeleton demands that they must die to avenge his family, and that's when his ancestors show up. Uncle Steve tells our vengeful friend, Jerry, that they've been listening from beyond the veil, and they want to take Axe up on his offer. They all took a vote, and they want the winged skeleton so they can fly. Jerry agrees to back off, and Axe points them all to a guard post that he collapsed, which has at least 200 dead Queensguard in it. Axe tries to add those points to his kill count, but Kez says if they bring all the bodies back to life, then his actual score is negative 113. Axe then mutters that he hates this stupid game to close out the story. After they make their way to the inner court, Axe wonders what Kez plans to do after they kill the queen. Kez supposes that he'd rule the kingdom, but Axe warns him that ruling isn't what it's cracked up to be. He once ran a kingdom, and every time he did something wrong, everyone starved to death. Waste treatment, annual budgets, guild diplomacy, starve to death, starve to death, starve to death. There's literally no upside, he says. Half the country's gonna be plotting your death, while the other half dies of the plague because you put the latrines too close to the camp. He reasons then that the best thing Kez can do is find a gullible idiot who likes reading tax manuals and put them in charge. Someone like Shen. Kez likes the idea, and that wraps up his quest, granting you a Kez token for your efforts. Once you exchange the appropriate tokens, the final questline of Crownfall opens up and has all of our protagonists reuniting for one final raid on the castle. Completing the side quests will also have the heroes from those respective missions show up here as well, and here's a quick breakdown of their interactions. Shen and Dragoness lovingly greet each other, and Dragoness says that he's duty-bound to remain by her side, but Shen corrects him and says that he's duty-bound to remain by Imperia's side. Dragoness fears that he's ruined the moment, but Shen reassures him and says that it doesn't matter, and it's great to see him anyway. Kez asks Bakit how things went with the princess, and the young flightless excitedly exclaims that he helped a gremlin put cannons on a toad, prayed to a statue for sardines, and got possessed by a god. Axe is shocked to see Crystal Maiden, and tries to impress her with what he's been up to. Rylai says she's still not going to date him, but in the end, they both agree that they're just here to kill people. Dragoness approaches Axe and yells at him for telling Pudge that he could eat all the Queensguard, and reveals that he renegotiated with the butcher, so now he's eating Oglodi corpses. Axe laughs it off, and says that out of the many deals he's made with Pudge, he's glad that it was this one that Dragoness found out about. Skriok is happy that Juggernaut found Serena, and Serena asks if there's anything they can do in return for her. The goddess says that with everyone distracted by the fight with Imperia, they can set all of the statues of Avaliva in the city on fire. Gondor comes back, and Kez tells him that they already took care of the issue with the Din. Bounty Hunter clarifies that Crystal Maiden is his target, as Zog's mother comes in and wants revenge for her poor baby boy. Batrider comes up to Dragoness and says that this uprising is drawing a ton of bets all over Whitespire, including himself. He's got a 4-way parlay that requires Dragoness, Axe, Centaur, and Sniffy to get killed, and he refers to Sniffy as my bat. Dragoness says that Sniffy belongs to him now, and Batrider is surprised at how much better he's gotten. Batrider acquiesces and wishes them good luck, and hopes that the 4 of them all charge into battle simultaneously. With all of that out of the way, one more comic opens up just before the final encounter. The Queen's Gambit begins with a flightless minister overlooking the battle on the bridge with despair. He figures that the castle will be overrun within hours, if not minutes, judging from how things are going, and he suggests that they fly from the nest to regroup with the Queensguard outside the city. Imperia asks the minister if he really has such little faith in her, and says that things are going according to plan. With all the flightless invaders on the bridge exactly where she wants them, it explodes, teaching them that the Skywrath are the ones who have broken free from gravity, and that the flightless below will cower and die, cursing the god that abandoned them. This causes their souls to float upward directly into Imperia for her control. The minister begs the queen to back down in order to spare all of the flightless, including his family, but she tells him that she tore off her own sister's wings to take the throne, and she would sacrifice anything in order to keep it. In deep regret, the minister breaks down and asks, "What have I done?" To which Imperia replies, "What everyone does in Skywrath, exactly as their queen commands." She tells him to look to the old gods for mercy, because he will find none from her, and the queen summons a horde of demons to end the comic. The party are stopped by a crown consul, who asks for a representative from the rebel army, a singular champion to fight the queen. Kez wants to charge in all at once, but the consul states that the Skywrath have rules for succession, and if they hope for a peaceful transition of power, they should play along. He asks one more time who they choose to oppose the queen, and this will lead into the Nest of Thorns minigame. Nest of Thorns is a clone of Vampire Survivor. You control one unit and walk around killing mobs of creatures, while your items and abilities automatically trigger. You can gain several power-ups as you level up, and in between games, you can upgrade various bonuses that carry over into future runs, such as additional movement speed, range, and damage. The mobs get stronger over time, mini-bosses appear that you can kill for strong Aghanim Scepter upgrades, and after 12 minutes, Imperia reveals herself for one final showdown. Once you defeat her, the ending cinematic triggers. Imperia starts running from the palace onto the balcony, surrounded by Kez, Shen, and Dragoness. In a final desperate plea, Imperia tells Shen to rip off her wings and exile her as she did to her sister 10 years ago, but she's abruptly caught off guard as Shen sinks a dagger into her torso. Shen remarks that Imperia was always the dramatic one, and now she's got a kingdom to run. Shen and Dragoness both return to their mortal forms before Kez takes off, and the lovers stare off into the kingdom of Skywrath, looking forward to a brighter tomorrow. If you've made it this far, thank you very much for watching. I know it's been a while since I've released a video, but 2024 was incredibly busy for me, but the plan moving forward is to get back into making more Dotaology and short-form videos in between the bigger releases. At the time of recording, I'm not sure how this is going to be received or how much the algorithm has affected my channel for being inactive for like 16 months, but it was nice being able to work on this, even if it took 2 months to put together between all the writing, voicing, editing. That said, Crownfall was an amazing event, and I really hope Valve does more of this thing in the future. But given the scope of everything, I think we'd be lucky to get something like this like once every 3 years. Fingers crossed though. Act 2 was definitely my favorite out of all of them. I think Centaur and Axe's dynamic was a goofy kind of funny without being too slapstick. It also had Sorla and Rix in it, and even if he showed up for only one panel in the beginning, any artifact reference is good in my book. Act 3's writing was a little weird. I don't know if anyone else noticed it, but it felt like it had to rely a lot more on swearing than the other acts. It just felt a little off to me. And man, Nest of Thorns was amazing. I love Vampire Survivors a lot already, and I thought they did a really good job of Dotafying it. I've also never really played Vengeful Spirit a lot before this, but I ended up getting the Arcana and unlocked the Imperia skin, and now I'm spamming her in Ranked, which has been really fun. But anyway, what was your favorite thing about Crownfall? Which act was your favorite? Did you hope for anything to happen? Let me know, and I will see you next time.